Hi, my name is Jade. Welcome back to my channel. For those that are new here, I'm a homeschooling mom of 3. My kids are 2, 5, and 9, and we're finishing up our 5th year of homeschool. Prior to homeschooling, I actually taught in public school. I taught 4th grade for 5 years. One of the questions that I've received a lot is what our weekly schedule looks like and how many days a week we homeschool. I think that for a lot of times when someone's first thinking about starting homeschool, whether their children are just now of school age or they've been in a public school or private school setting prior to the year that they're going to be homeschooling, and their kids and themselves are both kind of used to that 5-day a week, 8 to 3 type schedule, that it can be kind of hard to figure out, what a homeschooling schedule should look like, or could look like. And there's definitely no one size fits all. So I'm going to share my personal weekly schedule and what that looks like. It has not always looked the same, which I'll go into a little bit. But I'll just share what I do and what works for me, and I'll kind of share some other things that I know that other people do that work well for them also, in case that's something that you think might work better for you and your family. So as far as having a set school year versus doing school year round, I used to always do year-round school, and the reason that I liked that schedule was it allowed me to not worry about taking days off here and there when I wanted to. My husband is a firefighter and works 24-hour shifts, so and he's worked a second job. He's right now in school, so his schedule can be pretty busy and pretty crazy. So it was nice to have the flexibility of being able to take a day off if he was off, for us to go to the children's museum, or sometimes just do things like run errands that needed to be run, or doctor's appointments, and just things like that. So that was helpful. And at the beginning of my homeschooling journey, my son was kindergarten aged, and my daughter was 1 at that time. And then, since then I had my other daughter. So there's been periods of time where I knew that I couldn't do, as much as I wanted to fit in if I went from August to June, say, and then stopped. So we just always did a year-round type schedule. And then last summer, we did actually take the whole summer off, which was nice. And I was planning on doing that this year and decided not to. We're actually about to take just a couple week break, but for the most part, we're just schooling through the summer. And my personal reason for that is just because I like to have a little bit of structure, as far as I feel like there's a lot more sibling fights, or finding something to do, or I'm bored, or that kind of thing. I kind of like to have a little bit of a schedule in place for those reasons, and being that some of the things that we would have done we're not going to be able to do, or are choosing not to do right now. I mean, the YMCA that we go to, is they only have outdoor classes, but there's no childcare right now and things like that. So if we had taken the summer off, we would have still had at least opportunities to get out a few times a week, and for the kids to go there and play, which they enjoy, and swim lessons, and just all kinds of things like that are not happening this summer. So due to things being canceled, I decided we're just gonna keep on trucking, and it helps to have a little bit of a routine for me and for them. Which, is not true for everyone. I'm not saying that everyone should continue to school through the summer for those reasons. It's just what has worked for us. But like I said, we are taking a couple weeks off. So I've done both, as far as year-round, or more of a traditional kind of like August or September start, and then finishing up in June. I probably will go back to that schedule once things feel more normal. But right now we're doing mostly year round. So that's how I've done that as far as like calendar year goes. For weekly schedule, I have had a few kind of different schedules. In the past 2 or so years, there's been periods where the kids had activities that I've had times where I've spread them all out. So it's like not every single day of the week, but a few times during the week, you know, they had, my son takes ukulele or guitar lessons usually. He's not taking them at the present moment, but he usually takes them. And my daughter takes ballet, and they take, there's a science class that they've taken and an art class. They don't take all of them all year round, but there's been times where we had, you know, 3 or 4 days of the week where we were leaving the house to go to activities, and we were doing school for, you know, part of the day. And that was too much for me. That might work if you're the type of person that likes to get out of the house every single day of the week, and your kids like to get out often, then that may work for you. It completely drained me, and it was hard for me to get in as much school as I, you know, felt like I was comfortable getting in. So then we also have done schedules, and what we were doing prior to the spring was trying to get as many activities on one day as I could, so that most of it was like one, I called it the marathon day, because it was like leaving the house fairly early in the morning, you know, having lessons or classes and things like that. And then, you know, usually eating lunch, either packing a lunch and eating it in the car between things, or if the weather was nice, finding a park or picnic bench, you know, picnic table, and doing lunch that way, and then another activity or two in the afternoon. And so I've done it that way. And for me personally, even though that day, like, you do feel like you have just been everywhere, and, you know, it's not the easiest with 3 little ones on your own, but that worked for me better, because then I knew that the other days of the week I could, you know, sit down and get in a good solid school session. So it worked better for me personally. So prior to the spring, prior to, you know, all the craziness right now, I had one really packed day, and then I had one afternoon. I'm trying to think if that, yeah. And I had one afternoon where we had they had an art class, but it was a little later in the day, so I was able to get in a pretty decent amount of school in the morning. Depending on how our morning was going, I may cut 1 or 2 things, but I was able to get a pretty good solid chunk of time to do school before that class. So that was how our schedule was going. And then once activities and things were not happening, at first I was trying to do Monday through Friday. I was like, well, now we can do this since we don't have anywhere to go. And then I realized, like, I'm doing way more than I was doing before, and I don't know that I feel like I have to. So I recently started, since we're home more, I recently started doing Monday through Thursday school time, which is the morning work, where with all the different subjects that they do together, like science and history, and we'll read biographies and just things like that we do all together. And their individual school time, which the language arts and math, and handwriting, which I've talked about, you know, in some of the other videos. And I can link those. So we do that 4 days a week. And then I started doing, I called it Fun Friday, which is, I know, not a very creative name. Maybe you can help me name it something better. But the kids look forward to it a lot, and it gives us something, like one day of something to look forward to and something different. And on Fun Friday, they get a cup of coffee in the morning. I don't know how that even started. They started asking for it, and I think I said maybe once a week. So somehow it landed on that day, and it stuck. So they get their little cup like this that's like, you know, half coffee, half milk, and they get all excited for it. And then we play board games. And when I first started, I was like, oh, we'll do educational board games. And then since then, it's just turned into fun board games. Now, some of them are educational because in a lot of them there is, a decent amount of math. Or I just taught my son how to play Scrabble. So there's, spelling, and there's logic. And so it's given us something to look forward to. I think sometimes when new homeschoolers learn that a lot of people do a 4-day-a-week schedule. It's not really that uncommon. I know a lot of people that use that schedule because of activities and things like that, because most homeschoolers are not literally sitting in their home Monday through Friday. That's a misconception that a lot of people surprisingly believe. Most homeschoolers are not in their house Monday through Friday sitting at the table doing school from 8 to 3. I'm not saying there's nobody out there, but that's not the majority. Most homeschoolers have either co-ops or classes or lessons or tutoring or just friends that they get together with at the park or whatever. Most people have at least one day of the week that they're out and about, doing those things. And for some people, it may be 3, 4, 5 days a week, if that works for them. So a 4-day-a-week, like actually sitting down and doing school schedule, is not that uncommon. And I think sometimes new homeschoolers, when they hear that like 4 days is what we do, during the week, they kind of are a bit taken aback because they feel like, well, is that really enough? If my kid's used to 5 days a week, 8 to 3, is it really enough to do 4 days, for half the amount of hours? And I can't, speak to your exact children and your exact situation, but I can tell you, I feel like it's more than enough for my kids. And I want to add too, I have the perspective that not everyone has when they're starting out, of having been a public school teacher, which has its pros and cons, to be honest. But one of the pros, I think, is that I can specifically, think of instances when I was a public school teacher. I can think of instances where I know that there was wasted time, not purposefully, but just if kids are working on independent work, which they're going to be working on independent work for, a decent portion of the day, if they're working on independent work and the teacher's, circulating, and even if there's an assistant in the classroom, which there's not always, but even if there's an assistant in the classroom and there's 2 adults circulating, there's going to be times where often, there's going to be times where the teacher's helping someone, and some of the kids, there's going to be some kids that it was super easy for. They were done super quick, and maybe they're using their time productive by doing what the teachers asked them to do if they finish early. Maybe they're reading a book, which is productive, or maybe they're just drawing and wasting time. And it happens. I mean, even if the teacher is trying to pay attention to those things and not have wasted time, it happens. It's just the reality of it. I mean, in my experience, and I think most teachers would agree with that. And there's going to be students that don't have a clue. They're confused as to what's going on, and they're waiting their turn. They're waiting for the teacher to come to them, and the teacher may or may not even realize that they're waiting. Maybe they realize it, but it's like, I'll be there in just a minute, while they're finishing up with another student that needs help. Or maybe the teacher doesn't realize it yet, and there's also going to be students that aren't really grasping a concept 100%, but they're powering on through anyway. Like, they're trying their best and they're doing it, but they're like missing every other problem. And, it'll be caught, sure, at some point when the teacher either grades it or is walking around the classroom and stops and goes, oh, whoa, wait, let's look at this one again, or whatever. But when I'm sitting one-on-one, and I've talked about this a little bit before, but if you're sitting one-on-one with a kid, then you catch it like that. Like, if your kid is getting them right or not, because you're right there, and even if they're working on it independently, you're only circulating between 1, 2, 3, 4, however many kids you have. You're not circulating 25, by yourself, unless you have 25 kids at home, and bless you if you do. So yeah, you're giving one-on-one instruction, and I absolutely 100% feel that in 4 days of explicit teaching, my kids get as much, if not more, than they would get from 8 to 3 in a classroom. And I know that might sound like a really bold statement, but I've done both. I've been the public school teacher, and I've been a homeschool mom. And I just feel like, sitting one-on-one, I can really focus my attention on exactly what they're doing and exactly what level they're on. If something's way too hard, then we can stop and we can spend extra time on it. If something's super easy, like there's times in school too when, kids are doing work that the teacher needs them to do, so they are all getting extra practice. But the fact of the matter is, some of those kids don't need the extra practice and some do. And it's just the way that public school operates. This is not to bash public school teachers at all. So I don't want it to come across that way. But there's no extra practice just for the sake of extra practice in our homeschool, because if I can tell that my kid's like flying through something and they've totally grasped it, then I look at that book or whatever we're working on, and I'm like, we're going to skip this next question. Or sometimes if there's 10 problems on a worksheet and I know that they've got it, it's like, okay, well, we're going to do 4 of these, and then we're moving on because you've clearly grasped it. We're not going to waste time. There's just far less time that's wasted. So if you're thinking about a 4-day schedule, but you're not sure if it's enough or not, I would say just try it. Try it for, a month, maybe. Try it for a few weeks and see how you feel. But in my experience, I feel like, you can get more than enough school in if you're focused, sitting down, doing the work 4 days a week. I do feel like you can do it. Some people choose to do 5, and that's what works for them, and that maybe what works for you too. So I'm not suggesting, to only do 4. I'm just saying that is what I do, and I do think it's enough, because I've had people ask that, like I said, can you really get in? I mean, when I look at the growth from year to year, both just what I can see with my own eyes and what test scores show, the growth is there. There's plenty of growth. It's more than a year's growth in a year, so I feel like the 4-day schedule works fine, if you're really focused. I want to say too, some people, instead of doing, I meant to say this when I talked about the calendar school year, and I forgot. Some people, instead of doing like an August to June, or doing like a year round without taking any real breaks other than maybe, a little bit. Sometimes people will do like a 9 weeks, which is like a quarter, or they'll do, 18, go a whole semester or half the year. And then they take like a big long break in between each 9 weeks or 18 weeks. So that's an option too, if you're trying to set up your year. And you have the option to be flexible here. So you're not like boxed into it. You have to, look into what your state requires, but it's really easy to hit that total number of days, as long as you're being consistent, whether that's do a quarter, take 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off, or, taking a couple months off in the summer, just like public school does. And, anything that you're doing, you can count. It's up to you what you count or not. So if I, am cooking with my kids, and using math, and that counts for something. If I'm reading aloud, that counts. If my kid's reading to me, that counts. If we're playing board games, that counts. That's, like I said, math, and there's spelling worked into a lot of them, and just logic and all that kind of thing. So anyway, I hope that helps. This went longer than I intended for it to, but I just want to reassure you that whatever schedule you decide to choose, as long as you're consistent with it and it works for your family, it will be okay. It really truly will. It does not have to be a traditional school calendar, because homeschooling is not public school at home. It's a whole nother ball of wax. It's just totally different, and you're allowed to make your own schedule. So that's the beauty of homeschool. Remember, make a schedule that works for you. So I hope that helps. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe if this was helpful and you would like to hear more homeschool tips. And if you have something that would be helpful that you'd like me to discuss and maybe help out with, if you would leave it in the comments below, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.